So this episode is a very, very special one. It's with one of my close friends, Andrew Smith, who was one of the co-founders for an extremely well-known South African brand, YuppieChef.
Tend to see almost every successful venture, organization, business as having had an enormous amount of luck. But that being said, you won't be around to experience that luck if you weren't resilient, hardworking, figured out how to kind of stay in the game. And I recently read those messages again, and there was one that said, I've learned how to be kind by watching you lead. So your question is, what are the expectations on founders? Like, they're unspoken and blurry and murky. Okay,
Yeah, don't shrink back, don't puff up, just stand your sacred ground.
Yeah,
I love that, like that confidence. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to this show, and thank you for all the feedback and the comments that I've been receiving. It's really great to hear that it's landing and it's awesome. And please share with your friends, give the show a follow and a subscribe. It really does help. So this episode is a very, very special one. It's with one of my close friends, Andrew Smith, who was one of the co-founders for an extremely well-known South African brand, YuppieChef. So YuppieChef famously sold to Mr. Price a couple of years ago. And Andrew and his partner Shane is now working on something new called Brave Hardy. So Andrew has also become my mentor in business and has taught me just about everything I know about strategy, which forms the heart of my business, obviously. So this conversation was really special. We talked about what it means to be in this new phase of life for him, being post-exit and no longer needing money as a motivator to create a business, and also what gives him meaning in this time, and also lots and lots of little inspiration and stories and tips and all sorts of interesting things from his time building a YuppieChef with Shane. So I really enjoyed making this episode and spending some time with Andrew, and I know that you will too. Enjoy. Hello, Andrew. Where do you find yourself today?
Yeah, well, I'm in Cape Town physically, but that's probably not what you mean about that with that question. I'm in a stage of transition at the moment, and that's probably the best way of saying it, in a whole lot of different areas. From a career business point of view, I'm very much sort of between things, or new things are getting off the ground after the first chapter of my career. I've got two boys, and they are in the process of leaving home, one in second year varsity and one in matric. My sister's family immigrated recently, and they were a huge part of our lives. So I feel like I've had kind of 20 years of adulthood, and now I'm in the middle, and then there's going to be the next 20 years of adulthood. So that question is perhaps complex and deep. We'll see where it takes us.
That's good. Well, that's why you're here. That's what we're talking about. So trying to figure out how you got to where you got to. So tell me, what did little Andrew wanted to be when he grew up?
The first memory I have of that is, I think I was probably about 7, and I had to write something for school, and I said I wanted to be a stockbroker like my dad, because I think probably at that age everyone wants to be what their dad is. And I don't think I fully knew what that meant, but he worked with numbers and money. But my clearest memory in early childhood is playing with electronics on my bedroom floor. So, batteries and wires and lights and microphones and speakers. And my gran went overseas to England and came back with this electronic set. And that was that's definitely what I was going to do. And then the computer era came, and at some stage we got a home computer, and it wasn't connected to the internet or anything, and this is probably the late 80s, and I was just really engaged by a computer and making it do things, so very basic programming, I guess, at that stage, or even just sort of word processing, writing things on the screen, and that led into very clearly I was going to follow some sort of computer science, but it was unfolding before me. And then in the 90s, the internet, and I started teaching myself how to make websites, and we don't know if you remember the era of 7 Rand phone calls. So it was dial-up internet, but Telkom had this deal where when you started the call, after, I think not during the day, you could speak as long as you wanted, and it would cost a maximum of 7 Rand. So I would connect at some stage in the evening to the internet and then just keep going, because it was kind of our version of free broadband. And my mom would wake up in the morning and come through, and I would still be on there. She said, "You need to go to bed now." So that's I think where it was very clear my future was going to be in something to do with computers, online programming, and that's the sort of childhood era.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like that comment about being a stockbroker and money and numbers and tech, and because often when people talk about you, they talk about spreadsheets as well.
Yeah.
I think we've had this conversation when you're like, "But where's the spreadsheet? Like, just show me, put me in front of a spreadsheet, and I'll show you what I can do." So that obsession.
Well, I mean, the most I remember recently, we were going to a birthday party, and it was sort of a talent, bring a talent, do what you, and I said, well, can I do a live spreadsheet? Maybe I'll do someone's budget on stage for them. Yeah. So I think I came back to that. If I started studying a BSc in computer science at UCT, and I only managed 3 months, and I dropped out, and that wasn't for me. And I think if I kind of rewound the clock and I'd done something in economics or business or finance, I actually think that would have been more to my liking. But it's very hard. My subjects at school were history and geography and science. And, how do you know that business is really the thing that you want to pursue? Well, that element of business. So, some of that's only emerged later in life, but I only got one crack at university, and that was it.
What, one crack, and you dropped out after how many months?
3 months.
3 months. So did you make the first exam, or did you before the first exam?
No, there were some tests. Tests, and I definitely remember failing one of the tests, and that was a first for me. And I was so disappointed in what I had thought university was going to be. I was doing a BSc, and I got to choose exactly the subjects that I wanted, and I assumed it was going to be learning and studying on my terms, and it was just so boring. And where there were 400 people in the computer science class, and that we hand wrote code as our tests. We were writing Java code with a pen and paper. And I was like, this is not what it's supposed to be. And I think that the idea of accruing student debt and taking a long time before it got interesting in any way, this is not what I want to be doing. And I had incredibly supportive parents who said it was okay for me to drop out, and then I started working at 18.
What was your first job?
Actually, at a web design marketing agency. This is 1999, and I had seen in Pietermaritzburg, which is where I was from, and in the newspaper, there was an advert for this company called the Blue Box. Actually, they did the newspaper's website, so they got free advertising. And I just sent them an email, and I said, I'll come and work for you for free. And I arrived at the interview, and it was Paul de Villiers' house, Pietermaritzburg, and it was basically him and his sister-in-law. They were the only employees, and they mostly did graphic design, like brochures and print things, and they were just getting into making very static websites. And I had been doing that myself since school days, and when I was skipping classes at varsity. So I said, I know how to build a website, and he employed me. I mean, not quite for free, but close to for free. And I started working there, and it was an amazing 2.5 years in Pietermaritzburg in a small company that was growing, and as the internet was growing as well. So we went from very static kind of brochure websites to starting to build online systems for people and for companies. And even though I was only 18, I was kind of right in the core of the company. And I traveled with Paul around the country and made sales with him, and went overseas to London once, and then involved in hiring people and managing teams, all while I was sort of 18, 19, 20. So I was the first, straight into it.
Yeah, that's actually, I didn't know that story. That's actually incredible. So, I mean, I've got so many questions now. If you were to refine your mission today, like, what mission are you on right now? Or
Right, so we're jumping forwards again.
yeah,
Okay.
we're jumping forward and then we're going to jump back a little bit again. But because I can see where this is going. But
Yeah.
what mission do you think you're on now, or what are you on now?
Yeah, so it's interesting the timing of my life. I'm going to go backwards to go forwards as well. You know, I started working at 18, got married at 22, kids at 25, started a business, sold a business, and so even though now I'm only 44 right now, I feel like I'm kind of in the stage of my life. Do you know the warrior king sage sort of framework of
Yes,
thinking?
yes. Yeah.
And you know, I feel like I'm in that stage where I'm still excited to build things, to do things myself. I really love the execution part, and with Shane, I'm sure we'll come into that. Creating something. But I also feel the mission I'm on now is partly that sort of king, but even a little bit sage stage, which is like, how can I set other people up for success, and how can I help them in their journeys? And so my part of my mission right now at the moment is, how do I kind of take some of this life experience and give it on to other people in various ways? And sometimes it's investing in what they're doing, with money, or just with time, or just with conversations, or in what I might write or speak. And I mean, it's even, why would I be on this podcast? What's the point? I'm not here to sell anything. I'm not here to get famous or to pitch something, but I do this as well. Maybe there's someone out there who might be encouraged by this, or might learn something from it. So I think that's probably a primary missional focus for me at the moment.
Yeah, I like that word, missional. We've had this conversation once or twice, but obviously lots of people listening will know you from YuppieChef and the exit and the sale to Mr. Price, and we can talk about that a little bit as well. But I think there's something that you mentioned. We were at the Psycha conference, and we were talking about how you were sharing the YuppieChef story. And this was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And you shared afterwards, you shared with me and Fred that it was so freeing or interesting to be sharing something in such an honest way. Because whilst you're inside of the business, then it's really difficult to be really honest, because you have investors and you have to always say that everything's fine and it's growing and it's awesome. So, I mean, if you were to reflect on that sort of shift from between like being in it and now sort of being out of it, what do you think is your main maybe change of focus? Is it the part of being a mentor, being like guiding others, and if you can share a bit about that sort of journey, what it means to have left, like the post thing.
Yeah, so I think at that conference, it was one of the first times that I had been speaking, because I've done a lot of speaking events and interviews and all sorts of things over the years. And in every time I'm thinking like, there's a sale to be made here, either consciously or subconsciously. There's someone in the audience who I can win over to become a customer of YuppieChef, or a supplier, or maybe there's someone from the bank and I'm going to ask for extended terms. And so I always have to put on this this appearance that things are going well. And I don't want someone in that audience to think, well, I was going to buy an expensive coffee machine from YuppieChef, but Andrew's sort of indicating that the company's in trouble, and so they won't honor my warranty. So I have to put the picture out that everything is going so well and we're going to be around forever. And that's to the public, but I think to an extent it's even to my family. I gave up some sort of formal career, or at least a job somewhere else, to do this startup thing. I've got to have to let you know that things are going okay. And we started YuppieChef in the same year that my first son was born, and that was an incredibly difficult time, and trying to get YuppieChef off the ground. We were also reducing the work that we were doing, sort of hourly paid consulting work for clients, but that timing isn't always perfect, and so there was a lot of financial stress. And I have to tell my wife, who's a new mom, it's all going to be okay. And I don't necessarily know that. And I think perhaps even the most dangerous is then all of that selling ends up being sold to myself. I have to tell myself it's going to be okay. And that's so one of the things that I'm doing now at this stage of life is it's not even necessarily practical advice. I don't see my role as saying, well, this is how you could build a retail company, or this is how you could hire people. I think a part of my role in the world right now is just to say, hey, it's really hard. Let me share with you the journey, and let me now be that sort of voice of vulnerability or honesty or transparency. I'm a very private person, and so is Shane, and it's quite difficult for me to it's not my natural state to sort of show everything that's going on, but I've been quite deliberate in it because I've seen the value of people come up to me afterwards I think at that psycho event, and definitely some other ones that I've been involved in, and they've just said like, wow, I thought it was just me, or I was about to give up. Like I was thinking of closing my company down, but I realized now I should keep going because this is what I'm facing is what other people also face. So yeah, that's kind of the role that I see for myself at this stage.
So if you were to be able to go backwards, and then would you be more open and vulnerable? If you were building, if it was 10 years ago, like where were we 10 years ago, 2015, 2016? Do you think it would have been better or different if you were more open and vulnerable towards your family, or I don't know, to the public or whatever? Or is that like a necessary mask?
Well, I haven't actually reflected a lot on that, but something I have reflected on a lot is the idea of enjoying the journey and not the destination. And so, earlier you asked what has it been like kind of post the sale and exit. So the business was sold in 2021 and Shane and I left in 2022. So it's coming up to 3 years that we've been no longer part of YuppieChef. And that realizing how much we are striving towards some finish line. And once I get over that finish line, then I'll be allowed to be happy or relaxed or at peace, or and only when you get there, you realize I could have enjoyed the journey so much more. Mm-hmm. So I haven't thought too much about should I have been more vulnerable and open 10 years, but 10 years ago. But I have thought a lot more about should I have tried to just seen each day for what it was a little bit more. And I think that might have reduced some striving, and it might have reduced some of the need for the masks if I had just been more a flowing with the river rather than feeling like I'm striving so much to make it happen. I don't know. I think it's very difficult to ask anyone who is in the process of building something where there are other people involved, employees, maybe investors, maybe customers, to be really open and honest. I think that's very difficult. So I don't want to put that on anyone else right now, and I don't want to put it on my previous self. But I do say to my previous self and to other people, like just take a deep breath and try and enjoy today a bit more.
Yeah, and do it a little bit more. Do you think things grow because you strive, or do things grow because they are destined to grow?
Well, there's the saying of someone has a green thumb or green fingers. They're good at gardening.
Not me.
I think that it's not me. I think I could try and make a plant grow and it would die, and someone else could try and make a plant grow and it would grow. But are they making the plant grow, or is the plant growing? So I think that's where it's a little bit nuanced. I think that Shane and I had a lot of what it took to grow a company. We had in our team and individually, and I think we were really good at it. But at the same time, an enormous amount of luck. And that's something I have given a lot of thought to recently, is just the role of luck and hard work. And maybe you could add talent in there or something, what is that in that mix? And I don't necessarily, you say destined to grow, that's a whole nother layer of discussion. But if just from a practical point of view, I tend to see almost every successful venture, organization, business as having had an enormous amount of luck. And very often the people leading it can point to the occasions along their journey where they were just launched forwards by luck. But that being said, you won't be around to experience that luck if you weren't resilient, hardworking, figured out how to kind of stay in the game. And one of the most important things is that staying in the game is just to sort of find a way to not give up or die or have your venture extinguished before the lucky event comes. And it's interesting building now the things that we're involved in. We're involved in what other people are doing, but also the main thing we're doing now is Brave Hardy, which is another retailer, which is outdoor and camping equipment. And what we tell ourselves and our team is we will be successful if we're still here in 5 years' time. That we'll just get some lucky breaks and some things will happen in our favor. So what can we do to stay in the game for that long? And when that happens, then you could ask, well, were we destined to grow? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to prevent the growth by just making some silly mistakes and putting the wrong type of pressure on it. But there will definitely be luck in the process of getting there.
How do you keep on staying in the game? I mean, I give the same advice or ask the same question to many people because you've told this to me. Like, just hold on, even if it's by your like fingernails and like gritting your teeth or like by your teeth. How do you stay in the game? Like, there's always that, that little cartoon where you see the guy like digging and then he gives up and then just like a little bit, like a centimeter between him and like all the diamonds. And then the next guy just keeps on digging and then he digs into the diamonds. And I go, that's a really nice cartoon, but sometimes you're just digging in completely the wrong place. So there's like, I suppose there's like two questions wrapped in that. How do you know? Do you just have to stick with it? And how do you know I just have to throw in the towel? I have to drop out or I have to quit or close the business.
Yeah. So when we started working together, Shane and I, we were doing hourly work for clients and we wanted to start selling a product. And the first thing we did was a 3-day event with Fred, who's actually, I think, our mutual friend. I think he's the one who introduced us to each other, and another friend, John. And the four of us, we did a 3-day event and we launched an e-commerce site, which was Bug Zapper. It was selling bug zapping rackets. And after that, we also made a site called the Rat Zapper, which sold this like rat zapping mousetrap thing. And then
I don't know about the Rat Zapper. You told me about the Rat Zapper.
You see how quickly I was moving on from that?
You were. Well, I was like, no. You're not going to let you get away with that. What is a rat zapper? We have a bug zapper in our kitchen, like the racket thing. We don't have a rat zapper. Yeah. What's a rat zapper?
No, so the rat zapper was it looked like a mousetrap tube in it that you put a little piece of cheese or peanut butter or something, and the mouse or the rat came into it, and then they were electrocuted. And it was made by someone who lived in our area, and he was a self-proclaimed rat expert. And he said this is a lot more humane way, and it doesn't, poison the owls who eat the poisoned mice and things. And so we sold this online, and the idea with those types of products, and the next one, which was actually selling country flags and flagpoles, which was we had built for a client, and then he gave us the site because he got another job. And in each of these things in 2005 or so was, if you have a mouse problem or you needed Swedish flag, you would Google it. You would go online to look for it, because where do you go in the physical world to get it? And so the commonality in these products was sort of something quite hard to find. And then we started YuppieChef with a similar idea of, well, what are some products that people want that they can't get in physical stores? And we asked a chef friend, and she said QZPro, which is a brand that we knew because we knew people who were importing it, but it just wasn't available in the stores. So we started YuppieChef. So we have these multiple things on the go. And we actually also had some other, we're trying to build some software products, and we're doing all sorts of things. And I said to Shane at some stage, when FlagKit was actually making some quite good sales, I said, Shane, I think we should stop everything else, including selling kitchen tools, and just focus on flags. And I told that in all the onboarding of YuppieChef staff for years and years to come. And I said, if I'd got my way, you would all be working for a flag company right now. And they would kind of nervously laugh like, no, we wouldn't.
No, yeah, no, you wouldn't. It would just be you and Shane working for the flag.
Yeah. So but the point of the reason I'm bringing that all up now is I don't think it's obvious on day one that an idea is going to work. And I think if we just pick rat zappers or flags or something, and just gone like, well, we're going all in on this and we've just got to be resilient and we've got to wait for the luck to come. There's absolutely some bad ideas. And so a principle is perhaps to try and start multiple things at once, to have multiple lines in the water and not commit to one particular idea too soon. And I think it's something you and I have discussed, is that strategy is often retrospective. It's let me look back and see what's worked and then define my strategy like that, as opposed to an idea about the future. I don't think this might work. I don't think that's a strategy. I think a strategy is sort of understanding what has worked and then really doubling down on it. So at some point, we could see that YuppieChef was going to work. I mean, it wasn't on the first day. It might not even been in the first few months. But at the time where we saw it was going to work and we had enough evidence, now we have to stay in the game. And the way that we stayed in the game was to keep on doing work for clients for 5 more years. So we launched YuppieChef in 2006, and we still did hourly based programming and design and development until 2011. And at that stage, we had offices, we had a few staff members, but we knew that if we put too much pressure on YuppieChef itself to pay my salary and Shane's salary, and in 2009 we had Paul on as a third partner, if we pressurized it, and we said, okay, well, we've got 6 more months of savings. We're going to go all in on YuppieChef. And then if it hasn't worked, we're going to have to close the doors. It wouldn't have worked. And so there's how do you stay in the game is you try and make sure to not put too much pressure on too quickly. Now, I'm aware that there's different businesses that need different amounts of capital, and you can't do, I'm going to build a factory or aeroplane manufacturing company, and I'll just try and bootstrap and work on the side. Obviously there's different companies have a different financial model, but for us, and it was possible to do that, and I'm glad that we did. And so even now, with all the experience that we've got, I'm involved in multiple things right now, and I don't know which one of them is going to necessarily succeed. So I'm going to try and keep them going, keep all of them going, and then at some stage maybe we've got to commit a bit more, but not to not pressurize them too quickly.
I want to take a short moment to tell you about The Quest. The Quest is a transformative experience of self-inquiry that I run along with my friend Simon in the mountains in Franschhoek. It basically consists of a retreat, at the center of which lies a solo, where you spend time alone in solitude on the mountain, out in the open with only the basic necessities, whilst fasting. That means only drinking water. The entire process is designed to help you work through questions that you have. Questions like, what am I supposed to do next? Why am I here? Why am I making this decision? Why do I need to leave this behind? What do I need to leave behind? Or what do I have to pick up to move forward? It's a process that really digs deep into your motivations and helps you chart a way forward. If you are interested in joining this process, we are running the next one in October, and it is a 4-day in total quest. So 2 days of preparation, 1 24-hour solo, and then a day of integration. And if you're interested in this, please go onto my website, thisispia.co/quest, and fill in your details there. And I will invite you to a info session or have a meeting with you to discuss about why you want to go on this and whether or not this is a good fit for you. This has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I did my first one, a 12-day quest with a 4-day solo, about 8 years ago, and have facilitated many, many, many since. And I'm always amazed about how much this process transforms a human being. I would love to have you become a part of that circle. If this resonates with you, please reach out via my website. Yeah, that's a really interesting and really good advice. Like, it's sort of almost a very pragmatic way of working, like testing and seeing what actually takes, and then pursuing that. And there's a real big danger in getting married to a specific idea when that idea is no longer serving you. I mean, we keep on talking about Shane, and I realized all of a sudden that some people might not know who Shane is because you're so famous. They don't know who Shane is, which is absolutely not true. But if we can backtrack, and I we're jumping around a bit, you can backtrack. So you're working with Paul, making websites, making a little bit more interesting website.
Oh, Paul. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Two different Pauls in the story.
Two different Pauls. Other Paul.
So Peter, there's Peter Maritzburg Paul, who was my first boss and worked. Well, I'll just take over the story from here.
Yeah, go.
So in Peter Maritzburg, working with Paul de Villiers and going to a church in Peter Maritzburg where Shane was one of the elders, and not olders, not with an O, elder with an E, because he's a little bit older than me, but he was in his 20s. And he was going to, and we became friends, not very close friends, but I mean, we had a lot in common already at that stage. And he was moving to Cape Town to start a new church in Cape Town. And he did that at the beginning of 2001. And I came and visited him during 2001 and decided I also wanted to move to Cape Town, be involved in what he was doing. And I actually resigned from my job in Maritzburg, and my boss said, well, what are you going to do for money? And I said, I don't know. I'm going to just head out into the world and, see what comes. And he says, well, why don't you keep working for us here, but do it remotely and maybe part-time or something. So I did that and moved to Cape Town, and then actually started a Cape Town branch, I suppose, of the Maritzburg office. And I was building websites, doing programming, and Shane, who was employed by the very small church, started doing some design work as well for those clients. And after a couple of years, the church plant didn't go maybe like he expected it to, or we expected it to. And we were both really drawn to business and the idea of starting business and the impact we could have on the world through what we created in that time. And so we, at some stage, I closed down the Cape Town branch of the Maritzburg office, and then created a new entity with Shane, which was initially building websites for people, and then our e-commerce ventures grew out of that, and then the other Paul emerges in the story in 2009, but different Paul, and then he was with us in the YuppieChef journey. But yeah, so Shane has been a colleague, teammate, friend of mine for 25 years now that we've been sort of working and traveling together.
So there's I often say to people that I think the magic behind the YuppieChef is Shane and Andrew, like the relationship or the team that you guys were. How important was that in YuppieChef, and how did you build that or maintain that?
I mean, it was 100% important. I think we are both entrepreneurial, and we're both very talented. And I don't think either of us would do it on our own. I don't think we'd be capable, and certainly now we wouldn't want to. We're both very mindful of the power of that team and what it did for us. And I think there were a lot of practical things that it did. The one is that we just bring different skills to the party. So Shane he's a designer, he's a brand guy, he's a product guy. So he came up with the YuppieChef name on a weekend away, and he came back and he said the name is going to be YuppieChef, and it's going to be pink, and there's going to be the cookie cutter logo. And I was like, wow. It was like, what? What type of name is that? And I kind of resisted a little bit, but even then, and certainly now, I just trust his ability to name something. Yeah. And it ended up being a brilliant name. And if he says this is the product and we should import a container full of it from Europe or China, and I'll go, oh, okay. I trust him in that. And then there's a whole lot of things he trusts me in around the technology and the finance and the operations. So between the two of us, we kind of had all the bases covered, or most of the bases covered, that we could build something ourselves. In this, we're very fortunate that we're living in a time where something like e-commerce, could be two guys in a lounge starting a business, but we had those necessary things between us. So that's on the practical side. And then I guess there's more on the sort of relational teaming side. There's days when I would say, Shane, I don't think this is going to work. I've had enough. I'm tired. I'm angry. And he would say, hang in there. We'll get through it. For a large part of our, we actually bought a property that had two houses on it, and then it was subdivided. So we were neighbors for a long time, and then we shared a car driving to work.
Oh, wow.
So
cool.
we would have the sort of half an hour every morning and half an hour every evening, plus whatever time was during the day. But, there was a minimum. We kind of started every day talking to each other, and we ended every day. So we would be driving back in the car, and it might be Shane's turn to say, yeah, I don't know, this is really hard, and what are we doing? And I'd be able to say, hang in there, it's going to be okay. So I think there was a massive part around the carrying the burden of building a business with someone else on that journey was a big deal. And our teaming is, it's very special. It's hard to tell someone else you should go find a team member like that, because I don't know how you do that. You can't force it necessarily. But I don't know what the formula is, but I know I'm very grateful for it. And we don't fight ever. We never we never have sort of major disagreements, or we sort of figure out how to get around them. We have a lot of what I would call relational hygiene. So we both vary on time. We both have kind of the same core values. There's never going to be a time when Shane says, I think we should screw that supplier over, and I've got to say, no, Shane, we can't do that. We're aligned on the really important core things and the sort of the practical day-to-day things, and then we're very different on the skills that we bring to the party, and that just somehow works really well for us.
Yeah, that is exactly what I've seen, obviously, in your relationship, and it's such a unique thing. And I often, in my work with different founders or CEOs and coaching people, often find people that are like solo founders or leading a business by themselves. And you and Shane were really co-CEOs in all, practically. And but what should a solo founder do? Like, or somebody that's on this really difficult journey of building a business, and maybe listening to this and feeling like, screw it, I'm just going to give up and, go and work at like spa or somewhere, like packing little bags or something. What should they, what is there for them to do when they don't have that magical kind of partner?
I would say don't force a partner on yourself or on the other person, because I think that doesn't work out very well. But I'd probably say to try and find support outside of the company in whatever way that was. So I'm not an expert on this, because I haven't necessarily needed this, but I know there's a lot of people who get a lot of benefit from EO or YPO or whatever, those sort of more formal groups, or just smaller informal groups of other people, that there's something about sort of sharing the journey with someone else, which is really important. And where I've seen it go wrong a little bit is where there's a one clear sort of founder, leader of the business, and then they bring on someone who's not on the same level, and potentially, a minor shareholder or paid less or something. And the relationship is just not equal. There's an unequal relationship, and then it's not going to be the support that's needed. And so it's either sort of a very much supportive teaming together in the business, or it's fine. I mean, it's not like every successful business has to have more than one person, but I think those people need to, or probably have, figured out how they can find a support outside of their business that can help them with decision making, help them with morale, whatever it might be, to get them through those harder times.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of decision making, how did you and Shane make decisions? If there wasn't something that's like clearly a product decision, or clearly a say financial decision, or there was clearly like falling to one or the other, if there was like a combined big decision, like for example, deciding to open up a bricks and mortar store, which seems like most the weirdest thing for an e-commerce business to do, because it wasn't just, weren't you supposed to be Amazon? It's like, why in the world would you open a brick and mortar store, for example, or any other decision? How did you make decisions to get?
Well, I think it probably goes back to that half an hour in the car. I think there was an unbelievable amount of talking around a decision, or around everything, just talking every day. And I think in my personal life and in the business life, I have this idea of slow and then quick. So like a lot of deliberating, a lot of round and round and round and round. I mean, that's physical stores. If you talk about that was multiple years in the making. And then I know almost to the day, I think it was March 2017, we decided, okay, we're going to do it. And we put in our diaries with some date in July, store opening. And so we decided and we didn't open in July, or maybe it was, we opened in October, because we didn't realize you don't just get to choose. Well, when is the store going to become available in the mall? It's not always on your own timing, but it was probably 2 years of discussion. Or I mean, actually, we had first started speaking about opening a store in like 2010 or 2011, but more seriously for maybe a year or two. And then when it was ready, it was like, okay, well, now we're going to do it. And in my personal life, similar in my marriage with Debbie, if we'll talk about, say, moving house, or we homeschooled our kids when they were younger, and we wanted to spend some time overseas. And so we would talk about those things for a long time. And then all of a sudden it was like, next month we're going, we decided, and then it's happening. And so I think that's probably, it's not a very satisfying answer for you, but we didn't vote. Shane and I mean, you can't vote when it's 50-50. It was just like, talk about it enough until the decision is obvious, and then execute really quickly on it. It's probably the best I can say.
Until there's some sort of consensus, or was there ever a decision or something where you felt one person went in a direction and the other person was like, I don't know if this is going to be the right thing, but I'm going to go along with it anyway?
Well, look, I think that you started the question earlier by saying the things that weren't obviously in one of our courts. I think it's probably surprising at how little wasn't in one of our courts. That there's just so many decisions did quite neatly fall into what we brought that was different. And so if, yes, should we open stores? That's very much a collective decision. But day to day, I would just largely trust Shane in the decisions he was making around the range, around the brand, around marketing, around the stores, which he ended up owning, a lot around the people, HR side of things, that it was just obvious. I mean, he would ask my input and I would give it, but I was very happy to go with the decision that was made. And then so many things in my court were just obviously in my court. So I don't think that there was, obviously there's really big ones, taking investment, or when we took Paul on as a third partner, or there's some big things that doesn't fit into either of our buckets, and then speak about it. But no, I can't think of any time where one of us did something where the other didn't want it. I'd probably say that a maybe was a no. If it was up for debate, then it's rather not do it, rather than push ahead.
It's interesting, because I know that I think one of the products that Shane said you should bring in was the Arc carbonator, or the, I don't know, I want to call it the Arc Soda Stream, but it's not really an Arc Soda Stream. It's like the Arc sparkling water thingy magic, and on like a hunch, on Shane's gut feel, and it's like an entire container of it. And now, more than that. We committed to a container, but while that container was still on the water, Shane, we did this sort of timing of when would it land and how long before the next one would come. And Shane says, I think we should order a second container now. And the first one hadn't even landed. We hadn't even sold one. And I think I don't know what they are now, but there was something like a 4,000 Rand water carbonator when the Soda Stream was maybe in the hundreds of rands. And it's nothing other than design. It doesn't make a better product. But Shane just had this gut for, this is going to work, and it did, and it was a big seller for a long time. But when he said, I really believe in this, let's order the second container now,
I must have agreed, because that's how the story ended.
You must have
I
agreed.
can't remember the details.
Or Shane just swiped the YuppieChef card and said,
Yeah. Oh,
here's
too late. Done.
Yeah, done. Here's 1,000 ARC soda stream thingies. That's I still want one. I saw one the other day, and I was like, every time I see one, I think about Shane and you, even though they're in different other stores now as well. And then I was like, it's so expensive. I still haven't bought one. But that takes like an immense amount of trust between you two. Where does that come from?
I mean, I think some of it is just that we didn't have to make big decisions on day one. You know, those decisions, you build them over time. That we started working together when we both had nothing. I mean, really comically nothing, like R0 in the bank. And young families, and not being able to pay the rent on both sides. Like we go back to that point of zero together, and then little decisions that worked, and another little decision that worked. So by the time it comes to a container of ARC, there's so much trust of things that have worked that it's a lot easier. We didn't just arrive at that place of trusting each other on day one. It's a long time of getting there. I think as well, the transit. We didn't really talk about too much about the transition in the story, that we came down to start a church. Like we came down here with an idea of doing something bigger than ourselves, in service of something else, in service of a group of people or a community. And then business became the channel that we did that through, rather than the replacement. We didn't okay, scrap that. We're no longer doing it for everyone else. Now we're doing it to get rich. Yeah. There was this. It was not. We had the same intentions. We were just going to do it through business, and so there was, I think, always a trust came from trusting our really inherent motivations for any decision, that we weren't in this for our own personal gain. Or for, and there was that level of trust, which I don't know how we would have been as successful in our teaming with a different origin story. I think we trusted each other's origin story and motivations.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like I was having this conversation this morning with a reverend, a pastor, and who wants to go into business. And then I laughed because so often I have this conversation, like almost every pastor, reverend, minister I know wants to go into business, and also every successful businessman I know wants to be a pastor. Like, it's like I want to flee to the other side. It's like that scene in The Simpsons where all the people in the bar run into the church, and all the people in the church run into the bar when the apocalypse happens. It's like just switch places. And but there's something interesting about that for me, because having also been in sort of both sides, on the side of business more as a consultant, and then being obviously in church. And there's something, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Like there's a role that a founder plays that is often very much like that of a pastor, that taking care of people. And I don't know what my opinion is on it. Like sometimes I think, are we expecting too much of founders to be pastoring people, or are we expecting too little of them, that they should be better at pastoring their people? And or maybe the decline in religion, or people attending church regularly, that they've sort of now replaced the founder, the pastor, with a founder, and saying, now I'm gonna follow this guy because I'm not going to church anymore, or this woman, or whatever. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, it's a great topic. I can tell you that I have had a lot of thoughts on it, both during the journey of leading people. From the first person we hired was going to work in my lounge and go to the bathroom in my house and eat lunch at the table where my kids and family were, sometimes when I wasn't even there. And I think that was, other than the story of, we're here to serve a community and a group of people, there was a second part of the story of, like, starting in our home meant that we had to really think about who we were going to hire, and we had to trust them a massive amount. And so, it's interesting when you start talking about the past. I think there's a lot of it, we can think of it from an individual person saying, do I trust this leader? But there's a reverse in our case, which was, do we trust these people? And at what level are we going to trust them? And if I'm going to, if Shane and I are going to be out for a meeting, and this first employee or two, I think we maybe had in a house, is going to be in my house with my wife and kids, well, who am I going to hire? And yeah, who they're going to be, and how we're going to treat them. And that carried on throughout our journey together, where, well, I'm going to trust them with the way they speak to our customers, or I'm going to trust them with the stock in our warehouse. So we don't have any searches. We didn't have any, search when you leave the warehouse, have you stolen something, or trusting that they were going to treat our customers well. So I think that the relationship, even when YuppieChef grew to be in the hundreds of people before we left, and obviously we didn't. It's not like we had one-on-one. Really, I like to think we remembered everyone's names at least, but we didn't really have a one-on-one relationship with everyone there. But there was something quite special about the culture and the atmosphere. But it was challenging because we had people who stole from us, and we had to let them go, whatever the right terminology is in South African labor law. And we had people who we thought were really committed to us, and then they resigned and left, with little or no notice. And that kind of makes us question, but hang on, I thought we trusted each other. I thought we had this relationship. And at times, I think we treated a lot of people who worked with us as like really good, close friends. And then I've got to decide what their salary is, or whether they get promoted. And so there's some weird dynamics that happen in a business, which I think we maybe swayed a little bit one side to the other. Sometimes treating everyone or the people around us too much like they were our family or our church community or our close friends, and then sometimes going too far the other way, where now it's just all about performance and money and what the company needs and what can we get away with paying people. And I don't think we necessarily knew exactly, because there's not a lot of good models for how that should necessarily run. So I don't know that we got it right. But what's been interesting after I've left is reflecting on that whole journey and what it's all about and what the purpose is. And when we left, the team made us a book, Shane and I, full of photos, and people wrote, lots and lots of people wrote messages to us. And I recently read those messages again. And, there was one that said, I've learned how to be kind by watching you lead.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, of everything that I've achieved in life, that's pretty special. That's right up there. And there were a few other messages like that. And so I don't know whether it's, did I pastor, or what's the definition of pastoring, but I definitely impacted people. Sometimes, one person said 5 years ago, however it was, when I joined, I remember on the first day that I was there, you came down and you sat next to me at lunch with your lunchbox, and you greeted me by name. And I didn't even realize that you knew my name. And this person had remembered that thought, for 5 years, until writing it in our kind of farewell book. And so, yeah, I think that's pastoring. I think that's impacting people's lives. They're going to head out into the world and whatever their jobs are and things, and maybe they're going to think, I should also try and remember other people's names who work for me, or try and be kind, or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I think we did have that impact, but I don't know. It's not like we had a very carefully thought out plan. We were kind of making it up as we went along, to the best of our abilities.
And what do you think about the expectation that people place on a founder to pastor them or to guide them? Do you think that's fair, or is it too much?
Yeah, there's a lot of expectations, and it's difficult when you hire someone to join your team to make sure that expectations are aligned. What I expect of you and what do you expect of me, because we can't always even verbalize those things. Often founders are learning for the first time what it means to hire someone and lead people in different levels, from very senior people to very junior people. So it's not like they can always verbalize their expectation. And a lot of people, particularly if it's their first job or early in their career, they can't verbalize what they expect from the person leading them or the founder. So there's a lot of these unspoken expectations, which are then broken at some point, and there's pain that's caused, but no one's really to blame for it, but they just know that something's gone wrong in the relationship. And it pains me a lot. There's people out in the world who don't think I'm a good leader, don't think I led them well, don't think I managed them well, feel very hurt. And I've tried wherever I can to restore some of those relationships, but not all of them are restored. And that's very hard. So your question is, what are the expectations on founders? Like, they're unspoken and blurry and murky of what that is. And I think that later founders, founding a business now for Shane and I think we should be able to be a lot more clear, even in the interview process. Would you like to come and work for us? This is what we expect we're going to be able to give you from a leadership, mentoring, growth, whatever. Are you okay with that? But it's very hard to do that early on in a founder's career. So maybe they should get some help with that. But really laying out upfront expectations, and then consistently as well, because I think the person applying for the job is probably just so excited to get the job they don't know. But on an ongoing basis, let me just, for this year ahead, let me just tell you how I'm going to lead you. And I'm going to try and help you in your career, but actually this is what I expect you to be doing, your growth and your ownership and for your own journey and stuff, because there's something in the current generation. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a stockbroker. They were very stable careers. They were very, just year after year after year doing, you're a teacher this year, you're a teacher next year. And in the type of kind of commerce world that I've been in, but particularly with younger people in fast growing companies, there's a lot of, but I need a promotion, kind of every 6 months. And then there's a disappointment that, well, I haven't grown. And the implication is the company or the founder hasn't caused me to grow, and particularly if the company has doubled, well, then why haven't I doubled in my own, place in my career? And that's a difficult thing. No easy answers other than to try and have the conversations early and often.
Very, very tricky. YuppieChef was known for really great culture, and you speak a lot about hiring people that you trust. How do you hire well? How do you choose the right person?
I think the first thing to say is that we didn't always get it right, and nobody gets it right. There's and it's quite hard under certain kind of labor laws and stuff, but it is best to be able to say we're gonna do our best to hire the right person, and it might not work out, and then we should part ways quickly rather than slowly. That's not always possible and not always practical, but I think that's the first acknowledgement, is that it's not perfect every time. I don't know exactly. It's not like we had a formula, and we did change some of the ways that we did hiring. We did sort of some quite crazy things like group interviews. We would bring everyone, particularly when we were growing rapidly. So all the people had got to some kind of final stages and brought them in a room together, and then did, like tile building exercises with Lego. And there'd be existing employees, particularly the managers who were hiring for the roles that were open, who would watch it go on and to watch the interactions between the candidates. They weren't always even competing for the same job. They were just everyone who we were hiring at that moment. But how did they talk to other people? How did they work? How did they collaborate? Because in a one-on-one interview, it's very difficult to see how someone is going to react under pressure or things like that. So group interviews was one way of doing it.
That's
using
really cool.
Our network, obviously, it was one way of doing it. A lot of our the great people that we got to work with were because we knew people who knew them, so that came along. So those are, I guess, sort of the practical things. Some of the more feel things was we read a book about Innocent Drinks, which was like a smoothies company in the UK, and they had this idea of the back of a van. And I think they were going to do some show or something somewhere, and they had to sit in the back of a van for 8 hours together, a few of them in the team. And afterwards, they had this hiring principle, which was, could I sit in the back of a van for 8 hours with this person? And that's what you ask yourself while you're interviewing this person. So rather than, do they have, well, not on top of, do they have the practical skills? Can they execute the job? It's this idea of, could I sit in the back of a van with them? And that's very similar to, could this person work from my lounge and swim in my pool on a hot day. But it's a way of asking, it's a way of testing yourself to say, not am I just overawed with the skills or the experience that this person have, but I actually want to spend time with them. And I do think that we got that right a lot, is that we hired people who we just really wanted to be together. And that's how a great culture is created. I do remember at some stage saying, we used an employment agency once, and 5 roles came from the employment agency, and within a short period of time, 4 of them were out the company again. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so kind of continuing to own that as much as possible for as long as possible, not necessarily outsourcing to an agency or even outsourcing to the HR department or whatever, but really to say whoever's this new person, whatever team they're going to be in, that manager, and very often Shane or I as well, should be in that interview process. Like, we've got to own this, because I think sometimes hiring can be a bit like ordering a meal from a waiter. Can you bring me a new employee? And then HR delivers a new employee, and they go, oh, I actually don't like this one. Can you send me another one? and so we really tried to say, if you would like someone to join your team, you really need to drive the process. And whoever's sitting in the HR team can help you, because there's some administrative and practical things that are difficult. But who do you want to come and work with you, and will you take responsibility about the decision? And then if it doesn't work out. And so I think that those, really stressing the importance of, let's get the right person in through the door. And then we'll also work on all the culture stuff. But it requires that to start with.
When you say culture stuff, what does that mean?
Damn, I knew that was probably not a good way of ending the sentence. Yeah, the definition of culture is tricky. People can throw that word around quite loosely, and they can mean different things by that word. The culture is a lot about, I think, what you celebrate, who gets promoted, what gets celebrated. These are the things that are important to us, and often that stems from values. Values is the it's something which we were very strong about verbalizing, putting down, like this is who we are as a group of people, and then out of that we will celebrate those things. So one of our values was people, and then let's celebrate when we treat people well. So people is not just the internal people, but also customers and suppliers and stuff. So let's make sure we really celebrate that. And or excellence is one of the values. So let's celebrate excellence. And then when you define what your values are and you celebrate examples of those, then you create the culture that you want to some extent. And I think culture is also just the center of mass of a company. It's not like everyone looks the same, says exactly the same thing, but whereas, if you look around, where are we all heading together as a company? What direction are we heading in? And people who feel like they're on the outside of that will sometimes leave on their own accord. So it's not like you have to enforce it as such. Sometimes the immune system of the company will enforce it for you. But who are we as a group of people when we're together? Yeah, so I don't know, not the best answer, because all of this is quite sort of quite vague. But there was I guess an original idea of Shane and I get to create a group of people that we would like to spend 8 or 10 or however many hours a day with. Yeah. And what do we want that to feel like? What should we feel like when we are surrounded by those people? I think that's maybe the best definition of culture.
Yeah, that's a great response, because one of my worst is seeing really long tables on a Friday night or Friday
Mm,
afternoon at like Century City, or where all the kind of big business corporates are, and you see those long tables and you see half the people at least at that
mm,
table they do not want to be there. It's
mm,
like, because we're doing culture. Like, we're doing culture on a Friday afternoon because now the company is paying for pizza, or
mm,
HR has bought a couple of pizzas, and now we're doing culture. And it's such a terrible way of doing it, like trying to
mm,
force a social gathering or some sort of engagement when it's not that. Like you say, it's sort of
mm,
a behavior. And one of my favorite ways to think about it is Seth Godin, that talks about people like us do things like this. And I
mm,
really
mm,
like that definition. It's like, what, and the way you just said it so well is like, how are we when we are together? And that's such
mm,
an important thing. How do you make a culture really really strong? Is it celebrating
mm,
and hiring
mm.
the right people? Is there anything else that like makes it really strong?
Uh, Leadership. Uh, we probably underestimate how people will look to the leaders to see how they should act and
Mm,
behave. And, um, I think we talk about what is this, the culture in the Springbok rugby team, and people will say, well, it comes from Rassie. Like, yes, it's the sum of everyone there, but so much of that is just, yeah, who the leader is, and what they're doing and what they're enforcing. And some of that is, I think we can be deliberate. So let me try and think of some examples. I would help in stock takes, work in the store at lunchtime. So there was a store as part of the warehouse, but there was a small team who worked there and they needed a lunch break. And so someone would come from the office and work there for an hour. And I was on that roster, not all the time, but every couple of weeks I would do that, or help in the customer support in the call center when they wanted to have a team strategy time or something. So we would sit there and answer the phones and say, I don't know how to help you, but someone will get back to you. And we wrote cards for customers, and I wrote cards all the way through. So it was like, well, if I want to see this happening, if I want people to be involved in the stock take or work in the store, then I have to do it. I've got to start by being that person. And if I want the kitchen to be tidy, I should put my own plates in the sink. And so I think that the role of a leader is in setting the culture is sometimes um, to just refuse some of the trappings that come with leadership. Some of the, well, now I don't have to do that anymore. I get to have the good parking and the good office and have a lot more leave and have all these other perks and leave my plate on the table. But now I expect everyone else to operate in some different way.
mm,
And I think that's maybe a slightly um, yeah, it's a slightly more subtle way of how does a leader influence the culture. It's just everyone is watching the leaders, every action, every interaction. If I'm friendly, and when I say I do mean Shane and I, and then I also mean the other senior leaders in the company.
mm.
Like, if I'm friendly and I try my best to greet people and remember who they are, well, that will become the culture. That that is human nature to some extent.
Yeah, we ape. I was reading the other
Mm,
day. It was like, we are apes. We are actually the best apes of all the apes, because we ape so well. We always mimic each
yeah,
other. So we're actually really good
yeah.
apes. We're just apes with anxiety. I think that's sort of where the
Mm,
difference comes in. But I mean, the YuppieChef journey is well known to everybody, and everybody's seen it, and it always looks so kind of glamorous from the outside and really good. But what were some things that were really difficult and really hard in that journey?
oh, I mean, a million of them. It's just-
Try one.
um, so YuppieChef's particular um, business model, I guess, was and this is a very practical business thing, and then we can get on to some
Mm,
non business things as well. But our business model was to hold it was sitting at the end, like hold stock and have stores, which means that you don't have cash in the bank, because cash in the bank is is less effective than cash and stock. And so from day one, I mean, we did take investment in 2011 and 2013. So there were some sort of brief moments of feeling like we had a lot of money, but there was a constant financial stress for sure. And so the investment we took was venture capital from the US, and that had a pressure on it to grow like really quickly. And it's fine, make big losses now, and fly the plane as fast as you can towards the ground and just hope you're going to pull up in time. And that's exhilarating, and sometimes leads to big success, and sometimes leads to crashing into the ground. And so that was really, it was year after year after year of difficulty. I mean, then COVID was certainly the early parts of COVID was an extreme version of that, where 27th of March 2020, we cannot make any sales. We're not allowed to deliver anything, so no one's going to buy from us. But now we can't pay suppliers and we can't pay staff, and so the financial side is really difficult. And I think YuppieChef from the outside certainly had an amazing brand. People loved it for what it was, but there was an amazing sort of success brand to it. Well, it must be doing so well. And in some metrics, obviously, it was doing well, but like just the stress of taking money out of my home loan to put in the company at the end of the month so that we could pay suppliers. That's really hard, and it's hard when you do it year after year after year, for sure.
You must be doing well. You're selling 30,000 Rand coffee machines. Like, how can you not be doing well?
Yeah. I mean, how can you not do well? Yeah. I would sometimes say that I think our brand was bigger than the business. People's perception of how big the business was. Early days we were in our lounge, but people still thought we were huge. And someone actually phoned and said, "I'm looking for YuppieChef, but I just see houses. I'm in the right place." I'm like, "Yeah, you're in the right place." So the brand was always bigger than the business was. So that's a very practical thing. I don't think it's exclusive to us as founders, but we were in a particularly challenging environment of the way that cash worked in our business. But I think that probably the hardest relational and emotional side was around people, leading people, teams, people who were performing really well but felt like they weren't getting the opportunities that they needed or deserved, or people who weren't performing well and now we've got to deal with that, or just in a growing company how things change, like the roles change. Something new gets created, but we actually have to hire in someone who's more senior than the person who's already there, because we don't think that the existing person can sort of step into that bigger role. And so it's just difficult all the time to do that while still caring an immense amount. Like it might be possible to lead a company that's doing really well if you're like, well, I don't care what people think, we'll just replace them with other equivalent of human robots. But we really did care. I think sometimes I probably cared too much. Like I wanted the validation, and I wanted to be liked as a leader, and so I really did care. And you can't always create a situation where everyone is happy with every decision or every outcome. This take work from home, for example. Certainly after COVID, there were some people who didn't want to come into the office. They were delighted to be at home, and that meant they could look after their kids better, or a sick member of the family, whatever else. And then you've got people who live on their own and they're single, and they say, I don't want to work from home, I want to come in the office, but I don't want to come into the office when there's nobody there. And there's just no way of solving that. There's no, okay, well, we'll do this and then you'll all be happy. And so to make decisions that have an impact on people is difficult. And in the moments of making those, I think quite often that would overwhelm any other sense. What I said earlier about trying to enjoy the journey, I think that would overwhelm any other joy. Would be sort of sucked out by people who were upset about one thing or the other.
Yeah,
and I think that might be the price to pay for this great culture that you're talking about. We invested so much into trying to create a good place to work, but that has a big toll on on people. I mean, it's just to some extent the same as being a parent. You and I are both parents of teenagers, and we can do our best to create this incredible family environment, but people can still be upset with us. Our own family members can be upset with us, and we love these people. We love our families more than anything in the world, and yet somehow I can still do things that my family, can't believe that I did that. And the same is happening in a company, except you've got hundreds of them, and you've got financial pressures and implications. It becomes very difficult.
Yeah, that's very tricky. Very difficult. It's like with my kids as well, they get so upset. I'm like, I'm really trying my best here. Like, I'm not trying to hurt you, I promise. Like, I'm really trying to be a good dad. You spoke there briefly about wanting to be liked. And that we started the conversation off with like being, first half of life, second half of life, being in YuppieChef, going through the sale, very public sale as well, because it's such a well-known brand. And then now post-exit, doing a couple of different things. And then that, what sort of happened with that desire to be liked? Like, it's when you're at the head of a company, and then there's hundreds of people below it that's all looking to you every single day, watching your every single move, whether or not you put the dishes in the sink or writing the handwritten cards, to going and waking up and then going, okay, so what do I do today? Where are all my adoring fans, or the people that are supposed to like me now? What is how have you found that? I don't call it a midlife, but like a midlife passage, I suppose, as well, like happening at the same time as the sale. And I know your kids are also like finishing high school, so there's a lot of changes and things happening.
Yeah. So there's an interesting, people will say to me, oh, it must be great, you never have to work again. Is that saying, if I never had to work again, or if I had all the money in the world. And the idea that we're working almost purely or only for financial security is quite pervasive. I mean, people will say it openly, kind of half joking, but at the same time, I do think that becomes a primary meaning that a lot of people think that work is giving them. I think it's giving them a lot more than that, but that can become the meaning. And I do think for a lot of my YuppieChef journey, there was a lot of like trying to be financially successful for the company, for myself, for my family, was a big driver. Why did you get out of bed this morning? It's like, well, I need to be financially successful. And so therefore I will work, I will endure these difficult things or whatever it is, because I have this thing to achieve. And there is something incredibly noble and good about working and to look after yourself, or look after yourself and the people around you that you care for and love. Like, there's something great about that. But that is not the only thing. That's not the only reason that we're working, and it's not the only good that comes from work. Because on the day that I stopped working at YuppieChef, well, now what? Like, not just, I mean, you started the question with, well, there's no one to like me, but more like, well, what is the meaning? Like, I want to still be doing something productive. And even if this month I'll be okay, if I don't get a paycheck, like, well, but still I must do something. And I think it has been quite an existential journey in these last 3 years of really figuring out what was the real depth and meaning I got from work, even in the last 20 years, that I need to now be a lot more mindful of. Because in a way, the financial side can be the thing that is like the chain that keeps you at your desk through the difficult days. Now, if I have a difficult day, I could say, well, I don't have to be here. Can just stop. Yeah. There was no option to stop. In the lowest time was probably that during the COVID time. I couldn't just say, okay, guys, I'm out of here. This is too hard. Good luck, you and your families, all 200 of you, plus 400 suppliers, plus all the land, I'm tapping out. You just don't have that option, and you have to keep going. And so what do I do now that still creates a lot of meaning, and drive, and I have to kind of recalibrate why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And I don't know exactly. It's not like I've got great answers to. I don't have all the answers to that question, but I think what we were touching on earlier, this idea that even sharing this part of the story that we're on right now, is a reason for me to do something. To put on this nice shirt that I put on and be at the podcast at 3:00 today to record it, because I was like, there's meaning in that. There's richness in sharing this story and this journey, and helping someone else who's leading a business or just working or something to think, well, I can keep going. I should keep going. So I have to look for those things now, and not just there are people who I work with day to day, sit in an office with me, but it's now more of a broader place in the world. Where do I fit into that? That's what I'm grappling with at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. And I can see, we've had this conversation a couple of times about meaning and the second half of life and what that means. And so many times this idea of sagehood and sharing wisdom and sharing learning has come up. And I often find it in my own life as well. I think we're about the same age. I think I'm a year or two older than you, but it's like we're in wiser. And then it's difficult in the second half if you're not finding some way to teach and inspire to still find meaning, because it's like in the first half, it's that building, like the sale to be made. I wrote that down, what you said in the beginning. There's always a sale to be made, and it's like in the first half of life, it feels like there's a sale to be made, and then in the second half, you're going, okay, but what am I doing now? And that's massively important question for everybody listening to think about. And often the replies and the comments I've gotten on the show is like, so people are so grateful for us, for me and everybody and the guests having that discussion about what does the second half of life actually look like, and where do we find meaning in that part. So tell me, like looking ahead, what lies ahead for Andrew Smith?
Yeah, I've got a really big existential thing coming up in probably January, February, when my second and last son likely leaves home. It seems to be the plan.
Likely your last son, or likely leaves home?
Most definitely our last son, likely to leave home. Let's just clarify that. And then Debbie and I and our two dogs will be in the house together, alone. And kind of figuring out with it, it's so easy for family to be the thing that sets the schedule for your each day, each week, with the cricket match or the hockey thing or the weekend or whatever. The school terms determine your holidays. There's so much of the last 19 years of which kids have driven our lives, and we're unbelievably grateful for that. And I will miss it dearly. And then have to figure out this next stage of life. So that's coming up. That's quite a big deal. We're Shane and I are working together in business a lot together. Some things that we do separately, and I'm really enjoying this stage. I'm enjoying having a little bit more patience. Success is surviving another day with some of the startups that we're doing or involved in, and actually seeing that as a bit of a superpower. Brave Hardy, which is our current venture, which is to say, hey, we've got this thing called patience that some of our other competitors, or either they're big competitors or small startups, might not have as much of as we're able to have. And let's try and kind of tap into that. And it changes everything. It changes every day for me. And just starting the day going, we'll do what we can today, and it will be enough. It will be okay. That and some of the businesses that aren't ours, that I'm involved in, I enjoy just being amongst them, and I think bringing a little bit of that patience to them as well. Where I think in their own heads maybe they can become quite stressed and caught up in their problems, and I can kind of be there and say it's going to be okay. And even if it's not some profound wisdom, just being there, I think has some value. They tell me it has value, so I'll keep doing that. So I'm enjoying this phase as much as it's been a grappling. It has been good. I've been writing a lot more. I wrote in a journal. I have written in a journal every day since I was about 18, and I've spent quite a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 years actually reading through those old journals and then writing stuff that came out of that, and that has been an amazing reflection. So having time, although I know that's a bit of a lame excuse, we've always got time for whatever we want to do, but I really have put the time into now a bit more of a kind of reflective journey, and that's been really interesting to see, and a lot of that I've got typed out now, transcribed, and I can put it in AI and I can ask AI questions about my own journey and my own life, and that's been quite amazing because it can consume, obviously just hundreds of pages in a second, and I say, oh, what is the theme? So Alfred Adler, who's a sort of psychologist, psychoanalyst, I say, just kind of think about my life in the context of that and see what emerges. So I've enjoyed allocating a bit more time to that part of my journey, which I don't think I gave myself permission to do in some of the previous years. So I'm enjoying that, and I think that will continue.
Well, that's actually incredible. Like you can have, if you've written your whole life down, literally, then it can be inspected by AI and Adler and Jung or whoever, and you can, what did I do wrong all the time? Why am I like this? Why am I like this? That would be my question. Just like a couple of popcorn questions to finish us off. Oh, before I say that, it's also very true that you do give me a lot of advice, and we have a lot of conversations, and a lot of the time the advice is just hang in there, or it's going to be okay.
Okay, what else should we do for the hour?
And what else should we do? It's like, okay, let's have another coffee. But and that does help. I just want to tell you, that does help a lot, and it's helped me. It's carried me in the last couple of years, really, with my new journey and everything. So it does help to encourage you in that way. But just a couple like popcorn questions to end us off with. What advice do you regularly give to your kids?
They'll tell you if you ask them. Don't get a criminal record and don't get someone pregnant unless you mean to.
Not bad advice. That's really good.
So when, they're pretty much adults now. One is a legitimate adult and one's almost an adult. And I hope everything I've said to them over the years comes through. But that's the one thing I tell them, like, please just listen to that one thing. It's because either of those things could change the direction of your whole lives.
Yeah.
So please listen to me in that. That's actually the only thing that comes to mind right now. So we'll leave it at that.
That's not something you come back from, like a criminal record or getting somebody pregnant. What is a book that changed your life?
Oh, actually, Maverick by Ricardo Semler actually did a talk on this the other day. So very quickly, he takes over his father's manufacturing company in Brazil in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, and he wrote the book in kind of early 90s. And he was trying to create a radically different work environment where the team is a lot more engaged and it was a lot more democratic and a lot more trusting. And I read this book around kind of probably 2001 or 2. And it was at a time when I was thinking, well, I really like business, but I probably have to end up being a pastor, like you said.
Yeah.
Even on business, things that need to go. And this book kind of gave me the permission to say, actually, good can come from, like, business can be an end in itself. Business is not something that just provides money for the charities that do the good work. Business can be good work. It can be something that I can give my life to. So and recently, because I did this talk on it, I reread it and I realized how much over the last kind of 25 years, how much of my thinking was definitely influenced by that. So absolutely. There's a second book he wrote called 7-Day Weekend, which it might actually be a slightly better book. It's on similar topics, but the OG for me was called Maverick.
Maverick. Well, definitely. I haven't read that yet. It's on my list somewhere, on my long list. What is your favorite restaurant in the world?
I actually don't. I'm not a big foodie. It's so crazy. Like, I ran a kitchen tools company.
You read the spreadsheets.
I'm not a big foodie. I'm now work for an outdoor company, and I don't really like camping or outdoors. So I'm not that fussed about restaurants, certainly not the very fancy ones. I don't tend to go there much. Anything that's like just simple and good service. And actually, on a Monday, every Monday, Debbie and I go for lunch. And we go here in where we live in Takai to the Jake's in Takai here. Now, I know that probably Debbie or Shane's probably, I can't believe you said Jake's.
I can't believe you said Jake's.
But I like the familiarity, you know, of go to one place and just get used to it and go there. So I'm gonna give you the answer of Jake's, even though Shane will not like that answer.
The one thing you disagree on. One last one. What is a quote to live by?
Yeesh. I don't know. I've got a bunch written down that I look at often, but I don't know that there's one. There's one, I think it's a Jordan Peterson. I think he says something along those lines. It's going to be a paraphrase. It doesn't matter. He says, like, you know, don't shrink back. Don't like be overbearing. Just stand on your sacred ground. And that's not exactly his words, but it's this idea of just being comfortable in this is my spot where I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to shrink back from it. I'm not going to kind of cower in the shadows, but I also don't have to be, you know, like encroaching on things that I shouldn't be doing. I can say, this is where I am, and that's okay. So yeah, I think that's a good one to live by, some version of that.
Yeah.
Not those exact words.
I love that quote. It's stuck up on our pinboard in our hallway. Yeah, don't shrink back, don't puff up, I think is the word.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, don't shrink back,
yeah.
Don't puff up, just stand your sacred ground.
Yeah.
I love that, like that confidence. That's really cool. Well, that is us. Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time to come and speak. And then everybody should go check out bravehardy.co.za. Was it .com? Bravehardy.com. Yeah, bravehardy.com. And go and buy really nice camping gear and outdoor stuff, because Andrew is running the spreadsheets that's running it all. And and then where else can people find you online? Or you're not really an online social media.
I am on LinkedIn. I'm not on any social media. But yeah, if someone really needs to get hold of me, they'll figure out a way, I suppose.
We'll figure out. They can just reach out to me and I'll hook them up or something.
There we go.
Anyway, thank you so much for being here, man. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre. Yeah, thank you. It was a good time.
Cool. Thank you for listening or watching, and thank you for being on this journey with me as we try and figure out and find our way through the fog of life and work. So I've been writing a really short little daily letter that comes out each weekday, and literally very short. It's less than 50 words, and it is a burst of inspiration with some thoughts on strategy, how to find your way, how to become a better human being and do work that matters. You can go to thisispierre.co/daily letter to sign up and become a part of this community and hear about all the things that we get up to firsthand. Thank you for being a part.